Hello, everybody. This is Reggie. I'm the founder of the Baseball Nerd channel, and there will be lots of different things on this platform that deal with any and everything baseball, from comings and goings in the big leagues, eventually some college ball, fantasy baseball, and simulations. Anything and everything. At some point, it's going to be included on the program. One of the first things we're going to start with is a new simulation through whatifsports.com in May, June, and July of 2013. I ran a full simulated league where I was taking the basically all-star caliber rosters in the history of all 30 franchises around the major leagues. And to briefly explain how What If Sports and their simulations work, and this is for all sports, but my favorite, of course, being baseball, they assign every player a salary value based on their performance for a given season. So, for example, Jeff Bagwell in 1994, his value and the way they do their computation is over $10 million. His next best seasons in the late 90s are somewhere between 7 and 8 million. The purpose of those salary values is because in the simulated leagues, there is a salary cap. And obviously, you cannot have a team that's total value for the 25-man roster exceeds whatever the cap has been set for a given simulated league. Another thing to know about in these simulated leagues, they have the performance for every player broken down by season. So if you have a player that had a very long career, Nolan Ryan, for example, he's going to have many, many different entries across the years that he spent in the major leagues. They further subdivide players who were traded one or more times during a regular season. And so the way they handle that, anyone's eligible to be in the league if they pitched 25 innings or had 50 at-bats, regardless of the circumstances during a big league season. So if you have a player who was traded, for instance, and he had 500 at-bats and 400 were with the Royals and 100 with the Cardinals, then both of those seasons as individual accomplishments are going to be recognized. Kansas City as a partial, St. Louis as a partial, and then there would also be a version of the player that would be draftable that would be a combined season, since he played on two different teams, for the total 500 at-bats. On the flip side, if that same player had 470 of those 500 at-bats with Kansas City and only 30 with St. Louis, then you could either take the player with the full 500 on the combined or the 470 with Kansas City, but you would not be able to take the 30 at-bat version of the player with St. Louis. Same philosophy, of course, for pitchers and innings. Gabe White, who's actually on one of the rosters, is actually a beautiful example of that. In 2000, he pitched just about the entire season with the Colorado Rockies, and he pitched, I think it was 2 innings with Cincinnati before he was traded very early in the season. So on the 2000 profile for Gabe White, you can get the combined Colorado and Cincinnati, or the Colorado, but you cannot get Cincinnati in that case. So saying all that, there's basically 3 different types of players that can be drafted in the database that they use. A full season player is a player who spent all of his service time in the major leagues that season with one team, regardless of if it was 25 innings or 300 innings, 50 at-bats or 700 at-bats. Then you have players who have combined seasons, which are further subdivided into the partials if they meet the minimum thresholds. And in some cases, you'll see players with 3 partials. Mike Piazza, 1998, actually has a small sample with the Marlins, and then he's got the time he spent with the Dodgers, and of course the majority of the time in 1998 He was with the New York Mets as Miami turned around and flipped him up to New York within, I think it was maybe 12 days. It was pretty quick back in '98 when the Marlins had fire sale number 1. So the first league that was ran, no salary cap. Well, let's put it this way: the eligible players would not have hit the cap. The cap was $200 million, and so the teams that have been around the longest and had some of the historically great player seasons obviously had the highest payrolls: Yankees, Red Sox, Giants, etc. And the teams in the more modern era, particularly the 1990s era expansion teams, had somewhat lower payrolls because they just haven't had enough pitchers to have big years, especially the Rockies, and they haven't had enough hitters to have huge years where you've got $8 to $10 million players in every spot in the lineup. So the first league that was put together was run using the 1998 to 2012 alignment. The 2013 is not offered yet. And in that alignment, let's just say the Athletics ran away with their division. The Indians were threatened for a while by the White Sox, and the Twins hung in there for a while, but eventually they pulled away, and Cleveland ended up winning that division. Although you could certainly make an argument that if that same league as it was run again, the White Sox or the Twins could win it because all three of those teams had some of the best pitching and hitting combinations you could come up with. The Yankees just ran away and hid from everybody in the East, although Boston stayed with them for a while. But the Red Sox ended up being a very strong wild card entry, and there really was no one else threatening at the end, those 4 teams. The White Sox and Twins were the closest threats to Boston in the wild card race. The remaining teams in the East and the West just could not hang in. The National League was actually more competitive. The Braves won the Eastern Division, but the Nationals of the expansion era teams by far had the best effort. A lot of those former Montreal Expos on their team, and they actually ended up tied with Cincinnati for the wild card, and Cincinnati won a playoff game. The Cubs won the Central, but that was the best division of all because the Cubs were really good. The Reds and the Astros were very competitive. The Cardinals were very competitive. That was a very, very competitive division, really the only one in that original version of the league. And the Giants ran away and hit out west. I mean, it wasn't even close. The race in that division was for second place between the remaining teams, including the Dodgers, and that surprised me that they ended up closer to the Padres, D-backs, and Rockies than they did the Giants in that original version of the simulated league. The Giants, by the way, won the World Series in that league, upsetting the Yankees in that World Series. The way that league was run, it was just like the traditional baseball. So the American League teams had a designated hitter. The National League teams did not. They had an extra bench guy who could pinch hit and do some things. So this league, there are some differences. Among them will be a different looking alignment, and the DH in all for all teams in this league. I think in 3.0 we'll drop the DH and have pitchers bat across the board just to change things up again. But in the Sim League 2.0, all teams will have a DH. In the first league, no partial seasons were used. It had to be full season or bust. So Rick Sutcliffe, 1984, wasn't eligible to pitch for anybody. I've changed that here in the second league so that partial seasons can be used, combined seasons cannot. So Sutcliffe in 1984, he could either pitch for Cleveland using his stats for his time with the Indians in the early part of 1984, or you could use the great run that he had after he got to Chicago and use that 150 some odd innings on the Chicago staff. And so using him as an example because he is on the Cubs team for this league, which opens tomorrow, December the 12th. The other big change, well, 2 of them, I mentioned the alignment, we'll get to that in a second. There is a lower salary cap. It's 135 million, and nearly every team is very near that cap this time, so it balanced the league out a little bit. There was no way I could come up with a roster for some teams to approach that figure, but what that meant was those teams were able to spend a little more heavily to have really deep benches and deeper bullpens, whereas the teams that have the really star-studded rotations and lineups, they'll have quality on the bench and the bullpen, but it won't be the same amount of depth, and that there's not as many at bats to be had or innings to be pitched before fatigue sets in, because they do have a formulation, and if players begin to outpace what they normally should have done during any given point of a season, then they are penalized with a fatigue factor, and that can become a problem, particularly for pitching. So the alignment that I mentioned, let's quickly go over that. And then in the following clips and the segments that you'll see on here, we will run through the rosters on all the teams in each of the divisions. We'll start in the American League. And again, remember, everybody's using a DH because of this different alignment. I took a geographical approach with this alignment. And so the alignment looks like this. The American League East, those 5 teams are the 5 based on the eastern side of the Great Lakes, kind of in the industrial Rust Belt area, and up into Canada. So you're looking at Toronto, Cincinnati and Cleveland, Pittsburgh, and Detroit. The American League Central is essentially the Gateway Division, and that is a bit of an unusual division, but you'll see how it came together once you get a look at everybody else in their division assignments. The American League Central is the Royals and the Cardinals, along with Colorado, Arizona, and Seattle. And so the gateway theme, obviously, is St. Louis, the gateway to the West, and they're basically playing their intrastate rival with Kansas City. Kansas City plays in the same division with Colorado, kind of an NFL theme there, and then Arizona and Seattle. Geographically, it can work in a Colorado division, and if there was ever to be a geographic kind of realignment, you'd probably see something to that effect. The Western Division, because it only has 4 teams, is actually being used as the home for the teams from the upper Midwest on the western side of the Great Lakes in the Central Time Zone. Milwaukee, both the Chicago White Sox and Cubs, along with the Minnesota Twins. And the reason why the alignments are like that in the American League is because the National League obviously has 2 more teams, and so the remaining teams out west are the 5 in California, and they comprise the National League Western Division, obviously Dodgers, Giants, Padres, Angels, and Athletics. The Eastern Division is going to be the Sun Belt teams. So that would be the Rangers and Astros, the Marlins, Rays, and Braves. And that leaves the 6-team NL Central as the home for the 6 teams that are in the Northeast Corridor. The Mets and Yankees, Boston and Baltimore, Washington, and Philadelphia. In the first league, we were working on a balanced schedule. You can choose the kind of schedule you run these, and they base these on the actual way that they did it in Major League Baseball around various periods. And so there's 2 variations on the 30-teamer. Obviously, you can do the balanced schedule with interleague play from 1998 to 2000. You can do the unbalanced focus on divisional play schedule that we had from 2001 to 2012. If they do get to a point where they have a 15-15 option that mirrors what you see in 2013 and beyond, then obviously they'll have that as an option. But so in the first league, we took the balanced schedule, and that's going to be the same schedule being used in the 2.0 version of the simulated league. As far as the actual division homes and combinations, if you want to look at it, from the first league to now. In the American League, well, let's just look at it this way. All the teams in the West in the first version of the league are in different divisions in this league. In the Central, you have the Royals that are still in their natural division, and that's it. And in the American League East, Toronto is the only team that's in their natural division. So 3 American League teams, when you look at the standings as I do updates on this league, will be in what is their true division in real life and what it was like in the last league. The National League, the West, is really the only division that's going to look close to anything you would recognize because of the 3 California teams in the National League. And, of course, the 2 American League teams from the Golden State replace Colorado and Arizona in the remaining spots of that league. None of the teams in the Central Division, obviously, are where they would be in reality, and in the East, the only 2 that are remain in their natural division under this alignment would be the Marlins and the Braves, as the Rays come over from the other league, and the Rangers and the Astros obviously are out west in the American League, and under the old system, the Astros were in the National League Central. So that is an overview of the league. Next clip, we'll start going over the rosters and tell you how the teams line up on the field, and then we'll give you the opening day matchups as this league's ready to roll. It will be 3 simulations a day, although not every team plays in every simulation, so sometimes a team gets an open date. So it's a morning simulation around 1 in the morning Eastern time, another one around 1 in the afternoon, and one in the evening around 7 o'clock Eastern. So if you just want to simplify, an early morning, an early afternoon, and or a midday, I guess you call it. So just morning, midday, and evening simulations, or overnight if you want to call it that too. Either way, but I'll call it the morning simulation. The first games tomorrow, Thursday, December 12th. The final games for the regular season portion will be on Saturday, February the 8th. So coming up, we'll go over the rosters in each division, and I'll make my projections on which teams I think have the best chances to win out through this simulation, and we will take it from there. Clip 2, National League East, the Sun Belt, coming up.